Hello. Welcome to the 12th part of the necromancer's evolutionary traits. First of all, if you want to watch more recaps, subscribe to my second channel. Link is in the description. At the beginning of this part, we see that Andreas is injured and barely standing. Paimon is at the tip of Nickel's sword. Andreas asks about the ring. Paimon says, "Let's put the sword away first, and then we can talk, yeah? Think about it. With one dead, you could now negotiate a better deal." The masked man is dead. Andreas sees him and thinking of what's to come, what I should do now might be better if I use this guy's sword. Andreas picks up the masked man's sword. He asks, "Where's the ring?" Paimon says, "Wait, easy." Andreas cuts his hands and starts talking. "I have no interest in discussing this with you any longer." Paimon says, "In the cupboard in the bottom drawer of the cupboard in the house." Paimon coughs out a lot of blood. Andreas is confused. He thinks, "I was planning to get rid of him eventually." The masked man's sword has poison on it. Andreas sees a masked man and thinks, a skilled swordsman with a poisoned sword. Who is this guy? Andreas thinks about Paimon calling him Dan. Andreas realizes something and thinks, Bloody Dan? If it's really him, then this mask. Andreas removes the mask and thinks, as I thought, it changed. Andreas wears the mask. Andreas's appearance changes. He removes the mask and thinks. He even has the appearance-altering mask artifact. This confirms it. This guy is Bloody Dan, the one who started the war back in the game. Later in the game, he would be hired to kidnap the northern barbarian chief's child, triggering a major war between the North and the Empire. Originally, the war would have spread throughout the whole continent, and I would have been dragged into it. Looks like I unexpectedly prevented it. Andreas says, well, he wasn't the sort of character who was going to live out his life anyway. Thanks for the mask. I'll put it to good use, Bloody Dan. Nickel, you look for the ring. I'll clean up this mess. After that, we see at Alvin Street's clinic. Andreas is ready with news about Paimon and Den's death. He thinks, black mages. They could be right next to you. Terror in the National Cemetery. Paimon the necromancer and his hired sword fight over gold. Looks like I won't be affected by this. Then, it's time I took care of the most important stuff. He buys his estate back with 5 billion. Lucia covers his eyes and says, guess who? He doesn't reply. She says, you're no fun. Andreas says, yo. She gives him a fruit basket and says, what's with the curt reaction? Even though your cute junior came to visit you. Andreas says, I see. Thanks. She says, by the way, what happened to you? Andreas says, it's nothing. I just overdid my training a bit. She says, if you keep that up, you'll die one day. Vivienne also come there. She says, Mr. Fairy? She hugs him and says, I was worried. I'm all right, Vivienne. After that, we see 1 week later. He and his sister Amy are going somewhere in a carriage. Amy thinks, he said he wanted to show me something. What is it? I went with him because he said he got the ring back. But where's he taking me with all the curtains closed? And how did he afford this fancy carriage? They says, sir, we've arrived. Amy says, big brother, where are we? What is it you want to show me? Andreas says, you'll see when you get off. Someone says, he's right. You'll know it as soon as you get off. Welcome back, Lady Amy. She's an old maid. Amy says, Lupin? What's going on? Why is Lupin here? Andreas says, I asked her to work as our head maid again. Amy says, big brother, you know we can't afford that right now. I'm so sorry. My brother is still naive about how things work. She sees something. She gets out of the carriage and sees their old mansion. She says, Applewood Mansion. It's our home. Why did you take me here? Andreas gives him some papers and says, read it. She reads them and says, is this true? You bought our home back? How? Don't tell me you bought it back by doing something bad. Andreas says, I invented a potion. It's what allowed me to buy our mansion back. You don't have to work so hard anymore. And from now on, I'll make sure that there's money on your card every month. Amy says, without knowing that, even though you worked so hard, and just because of a ring, we see a flashback of her saying, don't come back anymore and you don't have to pay me back. She starts to cry and says, I said something so cruel to you. I told you not to come back. I didn't mean to say that. Andrea says, silly. Of course, I know that. From now on, I'll behave like a responsible brother. She says, I have always believed in you. But back then, I was so mad. Andrea says, I know. After that we see at his dorm. Timer is laying on the ground inside a blood magic circle. System says, achievement, second awakening has been achieved. He thinks, thanks to the trait I got from the achievement reward, I'm able to learn necromancy skills much faster. Trait, enlightenment. System says, enlightenment. Epic. The deeper one pounder and explores, the higher the chance of understanding a theory. It's a trait that increases the speed of learning skills and knowledge. Now that I can even summon a revenant, it might be time to try summoning Timer. It should be fine. I've double-checked all the potential causes of failure dozens of times. Let's get started. Andrea's uses minor necromancy. System says, executing the revenant summonings. One corpse has been detected. Andreas thinks, I can now fully utilize dual core. A usable material for necromancy has been detected. He thinks, nickel has evolved, too. If I add the powerful force of Timer to that mix, even if it's just me, I'll have the might of a whole troop. Arise, O monarch of the tiger tribe, who make that continent tremble. System says, the summon material's ability value exceeds that of the summoner. Stability decreases. Additional effects applied. Minor necromancy, revenant summoning success. Summoned a revenant legendary. The level of the completed corpse is high, status bonuses added. The level of the completed corpse is extremely high. Tier increased, it has become a revenant fighter. The level of the completed corpse is transcendent. It has regained some of its former egos. Timer stats window appears. Revenant fighter legendary. Timer, undead. Tier 5.
Mana 891.
Traits, egos. Mastery, fist, berserk. Timer screams really loud. Andreas thinks, even its howl is loud and powerful. Good thing I've cast soundproofing magic. Andreas says, from now on, I am your master, Timer. After that we see at Vilbor's Snowy Mountains, Marquis Magnus territory. A teacher says, I will now explain the end-of-term exam. The themes of the exam are survival and collecting points. All of you will spend 72 hours on this mountain, and you will have to collect the points that are hidden throughout the mountain. The bracelet you're wearing also counts towards your points, so you might want to take someone else's bracelet. Please note that if you are unable to continue with the evaluation, or if your bracelet is damaged, you will be disqualified immediately. Well, that's all I have to explain. Everyone, please put on your blindfolds. The supervisor will escort you to the starting point. Mount Vilbor's cliffside. Around 46 hours before the end of the test, Andres climbs the cliffside. He says, a flat area at the top of the cliff. Looks like it could be useful for both attack and defense. Maybe I'll set up a new base here. He sees Diane Alvin. She is protecting herself with barriers. Is she using wide area search magic and a barrier at the same time? She might be able to protect herself from the blizzard and still be able to find her way around, but the mana consumption must be immense. She is really tired. Her magic barrier disappears. Andreas thinks she used up all her mana. If I take her bracelet now, I can eliminate a powerful competitor, but if I had Diane's support, I could easily get the top score. Diane says, who's there? Don't move. Looks like you've used too much magic, Diane. She says, Andreas? Andreas says, magic is useful, but if you use it recklessly in an environment like this, you'll get yourself into trouble. Diane says, you're after my bracelet while pretending to give me advice, aren't you? I may be exhausted, but against someone like you. Andreas says, let me give you a suggestion. Diane says, stay back. Say it right there. Andreas thinks, you hate it that much. Diane says, what do you want? He weighs, would you like to team up with me? Diane asks, why should I? Andreas says, if I'm alone, I'll be vulnerable if something happens. It's much better to have a partner just in case, don't you think? She thinks, that may be true, but I can't trust you because of who you are. Andreas brings out something out of his bag and says, I wonder what is this? It's a chocolate. She starts to drool. He says, well then, let's get along. She says, don't get me wrong. Just now it was. He asks, you don't want it? After that we see someone is really beat up. And the one who's beating him says, is this wrong too? A goblin says, that's not even close, you doofus. There are a lot of beat up students. It says, my eyes are bad. Goblin says, how many times do I have to tell you it's green hair? The weather's shit. And I'm stuck doing this shitty job. We've been paid, we have no choice. Someone says, if you've got time to babble, get on with it and find him. Goblin says, whoa, you startled me out. He says, this is why I didn't want to use fools like you. He thinks, kid well. He says, I did a little research on the target you asked for. Why would you send us out just to deal with a mere student? And I heard you're coming too? Kidwell says, mind your own business. Just do exactly what the Master Jester has asked you to do. Now, go and kill the target. Goblin says, my mood is ruined. Let's get some rest before we go. Orc says, no. Let's track the smell a bit further. The human smell is either in front of the students or the supervisors anyway. If we only kill the students, we'll hit the target eventually. Besides, those students will become our enemies sooner or later, so let's take this chance to kill a lot of them. Goblin says, damn right. Kidwell thinks, fools. I have nothing to expect from you. Go ahead and draw their attention to yourselves. In the meantime, we'll plan a bomb formation on top of the mountain. We are very close to burying the Master Jester's target. The 12th part of the Necromancer's evolutionary traits ends here. If you want to see more, please subscribe and like. And if you want to support me financially, you can join my channel membership or Patreon only for $1. Patreon and Discord links are in the description if you want to support me. And a special thanks to all my Patreons for supporting me. Thanks for watching.